to another episode of Benchmark Podcasts. Today we have Mark Walmer, special guest. I am very excited for this conversation. We're going to get into what Mark does in the legal system here in Pennsylvania with pardons and expungements and probably a whole bunch of other stuff. So Mark, thank you for being here today.
You're welcome.
And I understand you have a company called Record Eraser. Tell me about that, how you got it started and what you all do.
Okay, I'll give you a little bit of background so it fits into a context. I was born and raised in Elizabethtown, and I went to Elizabethtown High School, then Penn State, then Boston for 4 years, and then law school up in New Hampshire for 3 years, and I came back in 1987 with a law degree.
Okay.
The only kind of law that would really capture my attention was criminal law.
Okay.
It's very simple in a way. It's very straightforward. You have constitutional rights if you're a defendant. There's a burden of proof if you're a prosecutor.
Yeah.
And there's rules of court. And so it's very orderly. And it was very easy once you understand it and once you develop relationships with the judges and the district attorneys or the public defenders, then you know the rules of the road. I always like knowing where I'm at.
Yeah.
So I have, as I mentioned earlier, I have been going to the Lancaster County Courthouse every week and occasionally every day. So I was 3 years as a public defender, 7 years as a prosecuting attorney. And during those years, I was in the court for 3 hours every morning, 3 hours every afternoon, or running around to various district justice offices, but just always court all the time. And I guess it was sort of around COVID or shortly thereafter, I didn't want to go to court anymore because I just realized that the system is really set up to give out criminal charges and criminal convictions as if they don't have any consequences. And I became aware, I mean, for the decades I've been doing this, I have probably watched tens of thousands of guilty pleas being given out in one of the 4 or 5 courtrooms that do this every day in one county out of 67 counties in Pennsylvania. The numbers are actually staggering. They're mind-numbing. And so 2013, I founded PA Pardon Service in order to give people access to the processes and procedures that can remove criminal records. And there's 3 of them. There's pardons, there's expungements, and there's clean slate, a new law that was passed last year. And so I started it in 2013, but then around 2020, I stopped going to court and I pivoted my entire firm. I got rid of my defense practice by partnering with a local law firm, and I pivoted my entire practice to researching and reviewing Pennsylvania criminal records to see what can be cleared and when. That's just my mantra. Criminal records, what can be cleared and when. And so I have 5 staff people, and all we do is review criminal records to see what can be cleared and when, and then requesting records from the court, and then preparing expungement petitions, preparing clean slate petitions, preparing pardon applications, all of which go through a different process and procedure. But it is also much more redemptive. You can actually give people hope that their rights are going to be restored, that their record's going to be removed, that their education and employment options are going to skyrocket compared to where they have been.
Sure.
And so it's been wonderful because I guess for 3 years I was over by Brimmer's on Harrisburg Pike. We just moved to Lidditz Pike last year.
Yeah.
And 100% of what we do is clear old criminal records.
Okay. Yeah. And you said the 5 staff people that work with you, your entire goal is finding records that can be erased. Are you proactively going out and searching and then calling someone up, say, hey, I have this record I found that I can get cleared for you, or you people are reaching out to you?
Right. So the website is recorderaser.net.
.net.
And it's I get compliments on the website. We have a YouTube channel, which is Record Eraser. And recently indicated that we had like 100,000 views or something. I remember 4 years ago, it started when I went to the president judge and said, hey, my marketing guy says I'm supposed to start doing videos. Can I make a video in the law library? And Judge Ashworth was like, sure, knock yourself out. So I went and sat down, opened up a computer that I barely knew how to use, and just started filming questions or answers to questions about pardons, expungements, and clean slate. And over the course of, I guess, 4 years now, it's just grown, and people like the video content. The thing about the law is that it's confusing. Half the phrases are in Latin. Even the designations that are in English, whether it's an OTN or a description or a statute or something, is gibberish to most people.
Sure.
But they know they have a record, but probation and parole never told them how to get rid of that record.
Right.
They just said, pay your fines and costs and don't violate the law.
Right.
So that it just seems inherently unfair.
Yeah.
It's inherently unfair. And in college, I was a philosophy major. And as I said, I worked on both sides, prosecuting and defending. And it just seems to me that if it's a criminal justice system, it should be inherently fair. And when you have a kid that's caught smoking pot and he gets a misdemeanor conviction, that's one thing. But once he pays his fines and costs, it should sort of be gone. But it's not gone. He's lost the right to carry a gun. He's lost other Second Amendment rights. He is having trouble getting employment, especially since COVID, when employers would just soon hire somebody that didn't have pot smoking in their record. And it just continues for decades.
Right. Yeah.
So the answer to your question is the website is they do special things with the website. So that anybody searching for how do I clear a Pennsylvania criminal record will probably find record eraser. And then if they fill out a form, they book an appointment. We research their record for free. We send it to them, and then they book a telephone call so I can talk to them about what can be cleared and when.
Okay. So it starts out as a free review of someone's record. And then it goes from there. Kind of a twofold question. How long does it usually take for a case, and how much money does someone have to on average spend to get it done?
Okay, well, now you're going to need to go into the weeds a little bit here. Pardons are required for any misdemeanor or felony conviction. It's a 2 to 3 to 4 year process that's filed on an application in front of the Governor's Board of Pardons, and it begins a 2 to 3 to 4 year process. So it is not fast, and I think that's probably good because you want to know that people, if they're getting rid of felonies, are getting a good, thorough review. But that costs several $1,000s, and there's various payment options and ways to try to make it approachable or affordable. Expungement petitions are much quicker. They're filed in the county court where the conviction occurred, and it's basically a petition that says, this person is trying to get this record expunged for this reason, and it gets filed, and the judge will ask the district attorney what they think. If the district attorney isn't opposed, the judge will sign the expungement order, and then once the order's signed, it takes the state police 2 to 3 to 4 months to actually destroy the Pennsylvania criminal history, which is what an expungement does. But you can't expunge misdemeanor or felony convictions until they've been pardoned, unless you're 70, but that's different. If you're 70 and you've been out of trouble for 10 years, you get to file an expungement instead of a pardon. Clean slate was passed last year, and clean slate says, for instance...
We're talking in 2025, so this would have been 2024 when it was passed.
It was signed into law, I think, January 24, and started being implemented June 24. And it says a couple of things, but what it really says is, one, if you have a misdemeanor that's over 7 years old, it should be automatically sealed.
Okay.
Sealed means hidden. It means it might drop off of public view, and it means maybe a light background search will not find it, but it is not gone because the state police still have a copy of that conviction, and you wouldn't get any of your rights back, but it's sort of sealed. So the first part said things might be sealed automatically until they're not. And then you get the phone call about, why wasn't this sealed automatically? I don't know. The computers are talking to each other. They're supposed to do it. They didn't do it. I, as an attorney, can file a clean slate petition asking the court to seal what the computers did not. And then, so misdemeanors after 7 years and some felonies after 10 years can be hidden. But one of the key takeaways is every crime that is sealed or hidden still needs a pardon because it's a misdemeanor or a felony conviction that needs to be pardoned by the governor, and then finally expunged is what destroys the record.
Got it.
So part of my challenge is talking to people maybe for 10, 15 minutes and trying to explain some of the complexities without making it, mind numbing.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I can already think of some people right now that who are glazing, their eyes are glazing over at your brief description
You
of
said too many
the
words.
multiple.
So can it be
Yeah.
cleared or not?
Yeah. Right. So this almost requires a Venn diagram. I feel like to take it back to high school, we need a Venn diagram to like seal, pardon, expungement when is appropriate. They overlap in some areas but don't in others.
Yep.
Yeah, I could see why this would be.
We should have brought my ping pong paddles. I have different color ping pong paddles depending on what you need. That needs a pardon, and that needs clean slate, and then a pardon. For your boxing
green light.
For your boxing gym analogy, the clean slate is the hook, perhaps, and the pardon is the right cross. So it's the 1-2 combo. Is the clean slate requires a pardon. Expungements are fine on their own.
Wow. Okay. So you can't just have something sealed indefinitely, is what you're saying.
No, I'm saying that it is a partial solution. If you seal an old nonviolent misdemeanor after 7 years, it's gone from most background checks, but not all of them. Anything that requires a fingerprint or a deeper dive into the state police records, they'll find it sitting there clear as day. That's the part that's lurking behind the veil. That's the part the pardon blows out of the water.
Gotcha. Okay, but a pardon can only go through the governor.
Yes.
Whereas the other two are handled at the county level.
Right. They're
right.
Expungement petitions and clean slate petitions are petitions filed in the Court of Common Pleas. They usually get reviewed and either granted or fought about in the first 2 to 3 months, and then whatever happens, the state police take another 2 to 3 to 4 months to clear their records or do whatever the court order said to do.
Sure. Okay. What are you just said fight about it at the county level from the DA, and then at the state level, like going into the board, the pardon board. What are some prevalent flags that you see them throwing up to say, no, we don't want this person to have a pardon or an expungement?
Okay, I need to parse them out separately. The pardons that go in front of the Board of Pardons get a very thorough review, ending with a Zoom interview with 5 board members and the client and me, if it's my client. And they are interested in what is your explanation for how the crime occurred? Are you accepting complete responsibility for what you did? Can you tell us how you've grown since then to convince us that there's no chance this will happen again if we erase your record? And that's what the interview process is like. Some of the yellow flags I see there are that if you have multiple DUIs or if you had a 20-year-old accident involving a vehicle when you were DUI, and the board will ask you, are you still drinking? And if you say, well, I have a couple of beers on a hot summer day, they're not a fan of that answer because alcohol is prevalent in 70% of most crimes. Drug addiction is almost easier to quantify to the extent that if you were addicted to opiates or something or other for a period of time, you usually know what your clean date is. And once you have 5 or 7 years or 10 years clean, the Board of Pardons has been recommending over 70% of them to the governor because it's an addiction. You've cured it. You know your clean date. You have your support system. Alcohol is just slippier. It's just slimier. It's just like, I didn't drink for 7 years and then I relapsed and then I didn't drink for 2 years and then my father passed away. And you just never know when it's going to come back in. So that's just an example of what the Board of Pardons can think, what I'm spitballing, they might be thinking about during an interview. Expungements are mostly no problem because you're either entitled to an expungement or you're not. If you have an underage consumption and you're over the age of 21, you're entitled to an expungement. And so the district attorney gets this 7-page petition, says, hey, he had an underage consumption. He's over the age of 21. Here's the statutory section. I'm not opposed. Gives it to the judge. The judge signs it. Clean slate is different because it's a very complicated statute that I have taken months. I don't know if I've been studying it actually for a year, but nonviolent crimes over 7 years old, certain nonviolent crimes over 7 years old, certain nonviolent felonies over 10 years old, but then you also can't have any other crimes more recently. It has to be a specific subset of crimes that are eligible. You can't have any disqualifying offenses. And so, in general, if you have a simple marijuana charge and it's over 7 years old, that would probably not require any work from the district attorney. If you have a marijuana charge that somehow you were wearing body armor when you got caught smoking pot, the body armor is not eligible for sealing with clean slate, but the marijuana is. But they're on the same petition. So a district attorney could oppose the entire petition, or they could oppose the sealing of the body armor. And it's just a whole different thing because it actually requires research, analysis, and those are the ones where sometimes the district attorneys, when the district attorneys don't know what to do, they schedule a hearing. Schedule a hearing, make the attorney come to court, the judge comes in, you start presenting testimony, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Huh. Interesting. So I know you mentioned guns already. I think something that's very important that a lot of people don't understand is depending on your legal situation in America, your right to have a firearm and to vote can both be taken away. Can you talk about some certain instances, like different charges,
Yeah.
where that happens, and then what the process looks like to gain those two rights back?
Right. So I'm mostly familiar with Second Amendment rights. Every American who's over the age of 18 has a Second Amendment right to purchase a firearm, apply for a carry permit, go through the sheriff's office, I think, try to get a carry permit. So that is a Second Amendment constitutional right. However, remember this pot smoking kid? It's a crime. It's not a big crime, but it's written under the Controlled Substance, Device, and Cosmetic Act. Well, the legislature passed a law that says any violation of the Controlled Substance Act, you lose your Second Amendment rights. Doesn't matter if it's a felony. Doesn't matter if it's crack cocaine. Doesn't matter if it's heroin or meth or ketamine. If you have a conviction under the Drug Device Act, your Second Amendment rights go away. And the way those rights are restored is, number one, it needs a pardon. So it's going to go in front of the governor's board of pardons. And then if you get 3 out of 5 votes from the board members, the gatekeepers, then it goes to Governor Shapiro. If he issues a pardon, then the state police are supposed to expunge the record automatically. And once the record is expunged, your rights actually aren't restored as much as your barrier goes away. So your rights come back to you because the offending statute has been expunged. So your Second Amendment rights come back as soon as the Drug Device Act or the conviction or the felony or whatever has been expunged, then your rights come back. The state police usually close out an expungement or a pardon by sending an affidavit of expungement. And that affidavit of expungement says, we've cleared our state police records. Go forth and sin no more. And then you can take that affidavit, go to a gun store, go to the sheriff's, try to get your carry permit, your Act 235 clearance, whatever you want.
Yeah. Okay. For those who don't know, Act 235 is carrying a firearm for your employment, like private security,
Right.
essentially. Fascinating. That, and as a side note, since we are at Benchmark, that's why it's important to lift heavy things, because the government can't take away your right to carry some guns that are in the form of biceps. So for any of you dads out there, I feel like that was a great dad joke, but
well done.
Thanks. Let's talk about voting. What's the process there?
So I don't know much about voting. My understanding in general was that if you have a felony conviction, you at least lose the right to vote as long as you're incarcerated. But I don't know that your voting rights don't return when you're not incarcerated anymore.
Okay.
But very few people call up my office and say, I want the right to vote back. It's always, when can I get a carry permit? I want to get a gun. The number of people in America that want to carry guns is mind-boggling.
Yeah. And this is a complete aside, but that really makes me uh, wonder about the state of our country if people are more concerned about having a firearm than about voting for the people who sit in a position to say whether you can have a firearm or no.
Well, that's a very
Um,
reasoned thought. But at the same time, I think in some neighborhoods, certainly in Philadelphia, certainly in Pittsburgh, certainly in some sections of Lancaster, you're growing up in an insecure environment where some of the people running the blocks are all packing heat and you're just trying to go to and from school and you feel a little bit unprotected and you wish you could carry. And if you can't get your carry permit, you might be tempted to just carry anyway or buy a gun off the street somewhere. And that's my perception is that the disenfranchised neighborhoods of America are very concerned and very scared about just the violence that goes on in poor neighborhoods.
mhm. Yeah, it's fascinating. I could see the argument both ways. People are concerned about their safety, and so they want a concealed carry permit. That would be one side. The other side, I could definitely see people who are concerned for their safety would just carry, and you know,
Yeah.
not worry about having a concealed permit or not. But
No, it isn't really
um,
helped by the fact that for every reasonable American that just wants to, carry for protecting himself and his family, you also have these nut jobs out there losing their temper over a highway traffic jam
mm,
and flashing guns at each other, which leads to criminal charges.
mhm,
And it's just lack of restraint.
mm.
There's just America seems to be a very emotional, tightly wound nation these days.
Yeah, I forget where I was reading it, but I remember reading that there's a consensus that America as a culture is very black and white. Um, uh, for example, Europeans, other cultures are much more comfortable living in a gray area.
Yeah.
Americans don't like that. It's good or bad, superhero, villain, up, down. Like it's a very black and white culture that we live in. And so, yeah, to your point.
Yeah, and the culture doesn't really take into account the complexity of, a complicated social structure and living in a melting pot of multiple people with
Mhm,
multiple backgrounds.
mhm,
It isn't ripe for a black-white solution. That isn't the way life works. Life
mhm.
is the entire spectrum, the entire
Yeah,
rainbow.
yeah.
But that might seem the way
Hmm.
certain factors are affecting America. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. To that point, are there any challenging cases that come to mind when you think of your past 12 years of doing this?
Well, actually, yeah. So as a lawyer, I've been filing pardons and expungements like forever, back to 2010 and even before that. The pivot to doing it exclusively was what was in the past 5, 7 years or whatever.
Mm,
Um, well, yeah. In fact, this was something I think I'm going to share, with the kids when I go out. One of the stories, I did a lot of nonprofit work with CareerLink,
mm,
who tries to help people find employment.
yeah.
And I used to participate in pardon clinics where people would come in to a clinic. I would run their records for free to tell them what could be cleared and when. And I met this one young lady who was 17. Well, no, she wasn't now. She was 30. But at the age of 17, she was a senior at McCaskey. As a senior at McCaskey, this one teacher was driving her nuts, and the two faced off in the hall, and the teenager pushed the teacher back against the lockers. That was it. Okay? Now, Pennsylvania, in its simple assault statute and its aggravated assault statute, sees fit to say any kind of assault on a teacher is a felony.
Mm-hmm.
So now this graduating senior had a felony juvenile conviction, which is going to show up on any background check.
Mm-hmm.
And so she graduated, and at the age of 31, I was talking to her. So 14 years later, she had 6 children to 3 different men, had never had a job in her life because of this juvenile adjudication for basically having a pushing contest with a teacher in her senior year. Like that kind of flatlining of your earning capacity. Actually, the thing that was a little bit more frustrating than that was I offered to do her expungement petition for free, because if you're a juvenile and you've been out of trouble for over 5 years and you're over the age of 21, then you can have a juvenile adjudication expunged. So we're back to expungements. But by the time I had prepared her petition and needed her to sign it, couldn't find her. Phone number went out of service. Or no, I called it once and a guy answered the phone and said, "Who are you?" I'm like, "I'm looking for her to be able to sign this thing." He's like, "Don't call back." Right? So again, the men were controlling her life. She didn't have an email address. You can just see how people's lives just tailspin. Yeah, that one. So that is one that did not have a happy ending. I know that there are. The thing is, once the person gets a pardon from the governor and their record is cleared, I don't have a really good way of following up with them. Like I don't do 1 year after, 3 years after, 5 years after. But I can tell you that this one guy who had a Pennsylvania crime that then moved to Alaska, and he was some kind of outdoorsman or something in Alaska. But when I had my final conversation with him, he was actually crying. He was crying and he said, "I didn't think this would ever happen. I didn't think this was going to work. It took 3 years or something. And I went to the gun store and I bought a brand new rifle and I have my carry permit and their lives just take off." Like he was very pleased. So it does work.
Yeah.
But also the numbers of cases that, we have are just, everyone is a story. Everyone is a life that's been affected.
Sure. Yeah. I can imagine that could be a double-edged sword for you to it could be a driving force to see the humanity in every case to motivate you to get the best outcome, but it can also, on the flip side, be sort of demoralizing to see just a wrecked life after wrecked life all day long.
Skeleton after skeleton. This one lady, very nice, wonderful lady, but she had a tough life. She was in Philadelphia, didn't grow up in the best neighborhood, became victim of drug addiction, and then got involved with the dealer, and he kept her more addicted, and he was also abusive. And so in order to get away from him, she actually threw herself out a second floor window. And then when the ambulance came, they took her to the psych ward and she got medication to stabilize her. But this happened 15 years ago. She asked me to help her get a pardon. And this is sort of another little yellow flag maybe of the Board of Pardons. Mental illness is really hard to predict with confidence that there's never going to be a relapse.
Right.
And so she had done such wonderful things in the past 15 years, and her medication was stabilized, and she was going to counseling every week. And the board denied her without a single explanation. They denied her. The rules say if you're denied, you have to step out of line for a year, and then you can get in line again.
Oh, wow.
So you can ask for this repeatedly.
Process to take a year off and then come back.
Yeah.
You'd be looking at 5 years to
more
come
like
back through.
5 to 6 to 7. Yeah, absolutely. But it also means that there's no downside to just asking again and again, because if the board is going to deny you because it's too soon, by the time you cycle back, 2 to 4 years has been factored in, which increases your chances if you've been out of trouble. But this woman that I was speaking of, I had to call her. I call everyone that gets denied personally. And I just said, "Hey, I don't have good news." And she was crying and she said, "Mark, I can't get Section 8 housing because of the felony on my record. I'm sleeping in a basement with cockroaches and rats. And the board denied me." That's a tough call. That's a tough telephone call.
Yeah.
The board never gives a reason for why they deny an applicant. I sort of try to make stuff up, but I don't know. We don't think about this stuff happening around the neighborhoods of America too much.
Right.
It's probably deliberately sort of kept from us.
Yeah. I can see why.
Yeah.
It's sobering to talk about our system being a system that's set up to uh, um, uh, predicate uh, your future upon your past, not who you are now and what you're
Right.
doing now. Like you would think to empower someone to be a tax paying contributing member of your society would be your end goal. And to
Right.
do that, you need to limit what's on their record if you can't get it
Right.
off, get everything off at all, as opposed to keeping it on because they might reoffend. Like why can't like we'll just cross that bridge when we get to it, right? I mean,
Well, so I don't know. I don't understand it. I don't like it. Um, it's not only saying we're not going to consider the person you are now. It's like not only are we going to judge you on your past, we're going to judge you by the worst event that ever happened in the past when you didn't follow the rules and you got a conviction and you broke the law. And that's what we're going to judge everything on: your schooling, your possible schooling, your Section 8, your education, your housing. It doesn't make any sense. It's actually sort of it's mean-spirited. It's mean-spirited, and I know the probation officers are all overwhelmed, but you'd think the first thing the person would do when they meet a probation officer, if I was a probation officer, I'd say, here's your criminal record. You should know exactly what's on it, because don't tell people you have a felony burglary if all you had was a theft charge.
right.
And the
Right.
burglary. So you need to know what's on your record. You need to come up with a story to explain it in a short, sweet fashion. And by the way, here's some employment options. And what I'm told is that probation is primarily, here's your bill, this is your fines and costs and restitution. We've decided what you can afford to pay monthly. If you don't stay on top of your payments, you'll be taken back to court and could go back to jail for failing to pay.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, we know you have a job, but you're gonna have to take PTO next week to come in and pee at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
or whenever.
Yeah. Or we might know that you also have child support, but we don't care because you got to pay the man. Yeah. So I don't know. It's a complicated system. I think part of the problem is that monitoring infractions in civil society is not an easy thing. And once again, sort of the black-white nature of things. You cross the line, you need a conviction, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. I'm sure you understand as well, though, that the system is set up to take every allegation, any kind of serious allegation, you're probably in jail waiting to go to court for 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 months. And you probably got a visit from your attorney, or maybe not. And then the next thing you know, you're taken off to court. You're spending 5 or 10 minutes with an attorney spouting Latin and asking you this, that, and the other thing. And all you remember hearing is, time served, I go home if I plead today.
Yeah. You're going to plead every time.
Every time.
Yep.
Every time.
Well, I don't know how to bring the mood up from that, but let's talk more about juveniles.
I'm not the most upbeat guest you've ever had. Well, it's not happy business when they get their records cleared.
But it's important. Like this kind of conversation is what's so important, because the more we can plant the seed in a young person's mind, anybody's mind, forget what your age, if we can plant a seed of hope that no matter what I did, no matter what is on my record now, at some point in the future, it could be different.
Yeah.
That is like we need planting that seed of hope is what we need to be doing.
Also to teach the difference between if you're tempted to commit a crime, like just think about it. Like if you get caught with marijuana, it's a different thing than if you have a pound and you're selling.
Well. So yeah,
pick your crime, pick your time. I don't know.
Which is also different than having a pound and trying to smoke it all. That's
well, hopefully that would take a year or two or something. I don't know what consumption rates are like.
For every person, it would be different, I imagine. So for a juvenile, so under 18, can you talk about how the system treats them from this perspective?
Yes. Yes, this is fascinating because when I was a public defender, I was in Lancaster County's juvenile public defender,
Oh,
and I
okay.
defended every juvenile that went to court from
Yeah.
whatever it was, 88 to 91. And when I became a district attorney, the district attorney put me in charge of the juvenile prosecution unit, which I built from the ground up. And so I understand the juvenile statute process pretty well. What I enjoy about it is that there's sort of two ways of looking at it. Kids are special and they need to be protected. And they need to be protected from words that make them feel bad, like adult words. So there's a different vernacular for juvenile than there is for adult.
Adjudication.
Right. Instead of pleading guilty, you get adjudicated delinquent.
Right.
Instead of getting sentenced, you get a disposition. When the complaint is filed, it's not a criminal complaint, it's a juvenile petition of delinquency. And so we want to use all these soft, feely words to protect the juveniles, but then at the same time, you go to court. The nice thing about juvenile is that most of it is rehabilitative. It can mostly be done in the community. There are juvenile facilities for some of the badder actors that need to go away. And of course, we all know that if you're over the age of 14 and you commit certain felony crimes, you can be tried as an adult and you would go to state prison, although the state prison system is supposed to keep you separate. Don't know that they do. So the nice thing about the Juvenile Act is that it has more diversionary programs. If it's a first-time offense, the first thing probation in Lancaster County will do is offer you an informal diversion. And that means that you go meet with your probation officer, and if you can admit to what you did, and it's not that violent of a thing, they can actually give you 6 months of probation, give you some programming, give you some skills, and if you complete it, you never even see a courtroom. It's an informal diversion. Informal, never go to court, diversion. So that's great. Now, the trick there is that many parents and kids, when they're meeting with the probation officer who's asking them, did you do this? They're thinking, shouldn't I remain silent because you want me to confess to something, but I haven't been to court yet, and I don't know if I should admit to it. And when I talk to these people on the phone, I say, no, go. This probation officer is your friend. Admit to what you did. Tell them, just complete it. So that avoids an adjudication. If you go to court, like for a juvenile DUI or something, they have something else called a consent decree. And consent decree is basically a way of saying if you complete 6 months of supervision without any infractions, then we agree that your case can be expunged without waiting till you're over 21 because it's a consent decree. It's basically like juvenile ARD. ARD is an adult program to give adult drunk drivers probation without conviction. A consent decree is the same thing for a juvenile. If you get past that stage and you're actually picking up an adjudication of delinquency or two, then that becomes an adjudication, that becomes a conviction, and then that is subject to expungement under the Juvenile Act, which basically says if you have been over the age of 21, if it's been more than 5 years since you've been off supervision, if you haven't had intervening misdemeanors or felony convictions, and if the district attorney agrees, then you can get that record expunged.
Wow. Okay. And that holds for all but like the worst of the worst.
I think it actually holds for everything, except that the district attorneys, if they see the big felonies, are going to be more likely to say, hey, they might just schedule a hearing. They might make you go to court and fight about it. And if you went to court to fight, you have what's called a Wexler hearing, where the juvenile and his attorney need to say what happened and when, what he's done with his life since then, why he's a good candidate, how this adjudication is holding him back from moving forward. And the district attorney has to prove that the Commonwealth has a compelling interest in maintaining the juvenile record. And he has the burden of proving that. And the Wexler rulings usually go against them. But there's a backup plan because if a juvenile expungement doesn't work, can you guess what we file?
A pardon.
Yes! Yes!
I aced it!
Juvenile adjudications that cannot be expunged can be listed on a pardon application, and it goes through that 2 to 3 to 4 year process.
Wow. Okay. So, but the majority of adjudications for juveniles can go through that
Yeah.
process after the age of
Yeah,
21.
and they're run of the mill. I
Okay.
mean, because most crimes are misdemeanors, and then, the more violent the crime gets and the more serious, there's less and less of them. There's less and
Mm.
less of them. So the
Mhm.
bulk of juvenile charges that are filed are people that come and go out of court one time. They stay out of trouble. They take advantage of services, and then if they can just walk off reaching the age of 21, they should think about an expungement.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So now, if say you're 21 and your adjudication was when you were 15, whatever, so you would qualify, but you're still, I don't know, you're still paying down some costs and fines, maybe, or something like that. Whenever money is involved, do you have to
You
keep
know the
working at
answer to
it?
that one, right? The system gets the money. Fines, costs, and restitution have to be paid in full. They also have to be paid in full before you file for a clean slate petition to hide it. They also have to be paid in full before an expungement petition. They
Hmm.
also have to be paid in full before the governor's board will consider a pardon.
Hmm.
So the system always wants to get its money.
Wow. I
That's
can't say I'm surprised.
No, there is something called a petition to remit. Occasionally, you can file a petition with the court and say, "Hey, I'd like to, try to write off these fines and costs." I've had a
Mhm.
couple of them signed, but the court isn't eager to do that. Everybody has a budget. It's mostly been this period of time between like 2010 in 2020, maybe even 2005, there were mandatory sentences given out for drug dealing, either in school zones or over certain weight limits or whatever. And some of those have mandatory fines of like $10,000 or $20,000. Now, Lancaster County didn't frequently attach those, which was nice.
Oh, great. Yeah.
But if they are attached, in some cases, I've been able to go to a president judge and say, "Hey, come on, I don't even know why these were assigned. Will you remit this so he can get a pardon or something?" And it occasionally works. I don't go to court anymore, but it has worked in the past.
Hmm. It just seems so backwards to me to make someone who, more than likely, the reason they're in the courtroom is because they don't have steady employment or a lot of
Right,
assets to
right.
begin with. You're going to ask them to ante up more money, more assets before you can give them a pardon so that they can then make more money
It is
at a better
backwards.
job.
It is backwards. It's like saying, well, you were disadvantaged. You were too disadvantaged to really stay on the right side of the law. So we're going to give you some more disadvantage and load you
Mm.
down to see if you can stay out of trouble this time.
Mm.
And I've had telephone calls where, grown men have been talking to me and they're just like, "Walmer, I might as well just go back to selling drugs. I'm in a neighborhood where I know what people want. I know where to get it. I can't get a job to save my life." And I'm like, "No, no, no, no. Come on, find a career link, find something. Just keep your head up. If you've been out of trouble for 10 years so far, if you can make it another 5, or if you put in for a pardon, if you go back to getting new offenses, it just resets that whole timeline of staying out of trouble for 10 years before you ask for a pardon."
Hmm.
But it's financially, yeah.
It strikes me that you, in the work that you do, have an immense amount of technical expertise and knowledge that you have to bring to bear on behalf of your clients. But additionally, you almost have to fill the role of a therapist, or like you have to have a lot of tough conversations.
Yeah. I think of myself as the crime whisperer because I have conversations all day about nothing about crime. So I'm on the phone with somebody who's been ashamed of this crime forever. He's
Mhm.
traumatized.
Yep.
He has been judged on this forever and ever. I'm just a guy calling from a website that
Mhm.
he's supposed to talk to me about what happened. And I'm just like, "Come on, let's get through this." Guy today, boy, I set him off. Guy called in today and he did 5 to 10 on a juvenile robbery. And he was like, "I was just in the car. I was just in the car. I didn't know they were going to go in and pistol whip the Turkey Hill guy and try to take the money. But, I went to jail and I sat there for 6, 7 months. I had a public defender, you know, And by the way, I always stick up for public defenders. They are real lawyers. They are the troopers of real lawyers. But he's like, I heard time served. I didn't hear time served. I just took the plea because my co-defendant, the one whose big idea it was to go in and rob the store, he gave a statement to the police saying I was involved. So what was I going to do? I couldn't fight it anyway. And he went and did 5 to 10 as a 17-year-old.
Wow. That's wild.
Yeah, well, that's just, yeah. So I'm not a fan of the criminal justice system the way it has evolved.
Sure.
Because it's accomplishing sort of the opposite of what you sort of think it should do.
Speaking of that, what you've been doing this for quite a while. Have you seen the expungement and pardon process get easier or harder over time? If not, like how has it changed over the time that you've been doing it?
So expungements have been pretty much routine. It's a nice, clear statute. You know what can be expunged or not. And by the way, expungements don't clear anything too important. We mentioned an underage drinking. That can be expunged when you're 21. If you did a summary retail theft or harassment or disorderly conduct or public drunkenness, and then you stay out of trouble for 5 years, that can be expunged. If you had charges filed against you for fighting with your wife, but then you and your wife made up and the charges were withdrawn, the fact that you were charged remains on your record, but you can expunge it. So the expungement statute is so clear that there doesn't tend to be a whole lot of tussling about it.
Okay.
Clean slate is that new statute
Right.
that both prosecutors and defense attorneys and judges are learning to understand. And when there's any trouble understanding something, the solution is schedule it for court. Make the attorneys go to court and talk about it in front of the judge. So that's brand new. The pardon process, I've been doing this probably for 15 or 20 years. In fact, all the way back to, I think I did a pardon in front of Governor Rendell.
Oh man, that actually is a name I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that process is because it's constitutional in Pennsylvania's constitution, it's very regulated. The process is the same. The forms have changed. The forms have gotten easier. The Board of Pardons is trying to digitize and standardize their processing, which we're trying to stay on top of. So that is all good. What has happened to change the pardon process is that I think it happened mainly during COVID or something, but employers just started using every criminal record against everybody all the time. Even if you had charges that were withdrawn or null pros, some HR departments look at this and they say, well, I don't know what nulle prosequi is, but you can't have a job. Well, null pros means it was withdrawn. It was thrown out by the prosecution. That means you're not convicted.
Right.
But so anyway, more and more people are having their records being used against them. And at the same time, because more and more people are filing for pardons, the amount of time is growing because the Governor's Board of Pardons is 5 very hardworking people. They have full-time jobs. And, well, who are they? Lieutenant Governor. Right. Dr. Williams is a psychiatrist. Harris Gubernick is the correctional expert from the Department of Corrections. Marcia Grayson is the victim witness advocate. And Austin, who?
Oh, the Attorney General.
Yeah. Dave Sunday, the new Attorney General Sunday, who is formerly York County's district attorney.
Yes.
And he ran and became the top Attorney General law enforcement officer. So he just sat through his first couple of pardon sessions this year.
So what I'm hearing is 5 people who more than likely have had a career working against defendants, and if not, at least have been sort of in the middle. Nobody who explicitly has defended people as a career.
It's true, and these people are appointed by the governor, but I think it's also in the Constitution. So you think about the makeup, and it sort of makes sense. The chief law enforcement officer of Pennsylvania, Attorney General Sunday, well, you want him to be able to talk about a case or think about a case because some of them are brought by the Attorney General. And he was not him, but his predecessors were the ones who prosecuted the charges. They handle everything like welfare fraud and things like that in the state. also as a former county prosecutor, he knows what it's like to be in a county with different sectors and different kinds of crimes. And so having him look at it, and he does seem very fair, that seems okay. The psychiatrist is mostly concerned with mental illness and drug addiction and how long you've been in recovery. The victim advocate is there in case a victim really opposes a pardon. She gets to speak up. So I don't really think they come from backgrounds that are sort of neutral. Harris Gubernick is the expert with the Department of Corrections. And what he's interested in is when you got that 5 to 10 year sentence, did you take advantage of any of the programs in the state prison? Well, yes, I did. Did you get any write-ups in state prison? No, I didn't. When you were released at your minimum? Yes, I was. Did you walk off your parole without any violations? Yes, I did. What programs did you do when you were in state? Well, I got HVAC. I learned how to do carpentry. I did these other things. That would be somebody that Harris Gubernick would think is a good candidate. Lieutenant Governor West is very supportive of people because he knows how much these records are used against them. So I think they're good and fair, but they are more conservative than, like, there's nobody saying throw out the keys, let everybody out of jail.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah. But the real thing is just that if thousands of pardons are being filed every month, and if these 5 people with full-time jobs need to review them.
Demanding full-time jobs at that.
Yes. And then they get together about 3 or 4 times a year.
Only 3 or 4 times a year?
Yeah. Oh, and a week or two ago, they reviewed 170 cases. But that's 600 a year are being processed through.
Right.
Another 1,000 or 2 just came into the front door. So, and I don't know if they're digitizing. They do have an expedited process. This fellow we keep talking about with the marijuana misdemeanor for possessing pot, he would be reviewed on an expedited basis. He would almost be green lighted. He would probably be reviewed in as little as a year or 2.
Pun intended there.
Yeah. He would be reviewed in as little as a year or 2 and probably would receive 5 votes in favor of his case. Yeah. I don't know if Pennsylvania is ever going to legalize it, but the board looks at it, being aware of how many Pennsylvanians, sometimes it seems like everybody, but they're very eager to review and expedite marijuana charges. And if that's all that's on the record, you might even be excused from doing a public presentation and just get a 5-0 vote and go to the governor. The governor has been granting over 70% of the pardons that are sent to him by the board. The board has been recommending 70 to 80% of the cases they receive to the governor.
Oh, wow. Huh. Those are not that great of odds. So 70% of applications are approved. So that means 30% are denied. And then at the next level, only 70% are approved.
Well, let's cut it into quarters.
So
out of every 4 applications that are filed with the board, they recommend 3 out of the 4, so that puts them at 75%. And of those that are recommended to the governor, he's been signing 3 out of 4. And so there's basically a 75% approval rate. But what is sort of behind the scenes here is the calculation of, is it a felony or a misdemeanor? Is it a violent crime or a nonviolent crime? Is it a crime of financial needs? Like the stupidest crime that's ever prosecuted, in my opinion, is welfare fraud. You have these poor people working, maybe sharing a house, maybe moving in and out of relationships, shifting jobs, and you go to see the welfare people and maybe you check the wrong box and you somehow don't report the right amount of income from the guy that just moved into the household. And then you get a bill 2 years later along with a misdemeanor or felony charge saying, number 1, you committed a crime. Number 2, you owe the state thousands of dollars. What's your repayment plan? Number 3, I don't know. And to me, those should all go into ARD or some kind of diversionary program. But the Commonwealth in general thinks, you know what? I see your point.
The Commonwealth being Pennsylvania.
Right.
We are
Pennsylvania. It's like they say, well, you know what? Maybe it is too mean to give you a felony. We'll just give you a misdemeanor. And you still owe the same amount of money and you still have a similar conviction that sounds like you're the fraudster.
Yeah.
Go get a job. Pay the state and your fines and costs. You got us back into the downhill slide.
Yeah, gosh. How do we remain positive?
Yeah.
So, thinking of juveniles, so what would be the advice you would give to a 14, 15, 16-year-old who has just been adjudicated? So they did whatever they did. They got through it. Now it's on their record. And they're sitting there looking at you. I'm 16. What do I do with my life?
Walk off the next 5 years without having any contact with law enforcement, and you'll get an expungement. And the juvenile records are shielded from some background checks. Felonies aren't, but misdemeanor adjudications might not even show up. It's sort of the same as it's always been, except it's harder these days for young people, which is just stay out of trouble, keep your nose clean, go get a job or 2 or 3, try to take care of yourself and get your career launched. Like that, if I tell your kids stories like this, I'm going to look as old as my hair is white. But these days, with cell phones and with kids and with schooling and all this stuff, it's just so important to just tell them, how do you tell a teenage boy, if you see a picture of a naked girl, don't look at it, delete it, and don't send it to anyone? Don't do that. Okay. Hey, Tim, look at this. So, you know what I just did there?
Yeah.
If it's an underage girl,
right, you disseminated,
which takes it from a misdemeanor to a felony too.
Yep.
And every one of those pictures is a separate felony. I don't know. How do you tell young people, think about it before you do it? Think about it before you do it. The number one crime that I see happen most frequently is the guy who just said, look, I was the driver. I didn't even go in. You know what? You were a conspirator.
Yep.
You knew what they were going to do. You drove them there. Just because you stay in the car doesn't mean, and I don't know why everybody doesn't know this. There's movies galore about conspirators, but they're thinking all I did was drive. My buddy said they wanted to go into this guy's house and take his Xbox. He's at the shore. We'll bring it back. That doesn't sound like a crime. Well, it's a felony.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Whew. Gosh, I feel like we're just about out of time here. We've talked a lot.
I think I need therapy.
Hi.
Everybody needs counseling after talking to me for a while.
Gosh, it feels like we could keep talking, but we've already been talking for an hour at breakneck speed. Was there anything else you really want to get across?
Think about consequences and collateral consequences. If you've been charged with a crime, doesn't matter if you did it or not. Book a free consultation with a defense attorney. They know the collateral consequences. Collateral, things you're not thinking of. Consequences, things that are going to mess you up. Always talk to an attorney for free, whether it's a parking ticket, a speeding ticket, a misdemeanor, a felony. Go find out what the real consequences are, and then decide if you want to pay the attorney or not. I guarantee anything that turns into a conviction will haunt you for years or decades.
That's sobering advice here on the Benchmark podcast. That's it.
Thank you, Benchmark.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us. And yeah, thank you all for joining us and watching to the end. If you have any questions or concerns, reach out to us. Benchmark Strong, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, 102 South Prince Street in person. And we will answer all of the questions that you send our way. And if we can't answer them, we'll reach out to awesome people like Mark who can help us out. If you are someone who thinks you might qualify for a pardon or an expungement, and you're connected to Benchmark, reach out to us and we can connect you to Mark.
Find out what can be cleared and when.
Yeah. Mark, how can people find your services?
Well, recorderacer.net has a form, and if somebody fills out first name, last name, date of birth, phone number, email, we will research their record for free. Unless it's a juvenile case, then it's easier if the juvenile actually goes and requests his own court records. But if
That
he
makes
does that
sense.
and sends them to support@recorderacer.net, we'll review them for free and give free advice.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much.
Thank
It's
you.
been a pleasure.
Likewise.
Thank you all again. That's a wrap.